Peter, does putting a few thousand troops at Putin's doorstep scare him?
It might not scare him, but I think at least recognizes that the security architecture in Eastern Europe has fundamentally shifted. I would just commend your viewers a map of Eastern Europe. Putin has absorbed Belarus in the past several years. Lukashenko, the dictator there, has become a proxy, an obstreperous one, but a proxy nonetheless. Kaliningrad, an exclave on the Baltic Sea, has become armed to the teeth. That's a Russian territory, which borders two American treaty allies, Poland and Lithuania. And so I think the U.S. is deciding or thinking about these steps. Despite commitments made in 1997, a quarter of a century ago, that we would not station on a permanent basis U.S. troops along Russian territory because Putin has shifted the chessboard in Eastern Europe. And maybe a second element that clearly this is being communicated to the press and to the Russians before a Russian move on Ukraine as a way of attempting to affect Putin's calculus.
We just heard Secretary of State Antony Blinken say that the U.S. is not considering preemptive sanctions because it would lose its deterrent effect. Do you agree with that?
I don't agree, because I think we've brought economic sanctions to what amounts to a knife fight. This is a military crisis, and I don't think the carrot of arms control, which is what the U.S. has brought to talks in Geneva to the Russians, or the stick of economic sanctions is enough to deter Vladimir Putin from his grand prize of Ukraine. And so I think we do need to think about military measures, arming the Ukrainians. The administration has taken some steps in this direction in the past several weeks, but I'm afraid it's been a little bit too little, too late.
Here's John Ratcliffe on some of the missteps involving the Biden administration in this crisis. Take a listen.
I think people have found out why the Biden White House doesn't let Joe Biden take live, unscripted questions. Joe Biden himself had to reverse what he said only a few hours later. The Ukrainian president himself essentially sent out a tweet saying, for the love of God, please don't listen to the man in the White House. The bottom line is, you know, Vladimir Putin is not just winning, but he's won on this issue.
Peter, if Trump were in office, would Putin be going this far?
I think there was a certain unpredictability about Trump. He swung a little bit like a pendulum between, say, Tucker Carlson and John Bolton. But there was this Qasem Soleimani factor, as I like to call it, which, of course, is a reference to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard commander in Iran, who Donald Trump ordered assassinated when he was in Baghdad a few years ago. This had a shockwaves, ripple effects around the world. You never quite knew how Donald Trump would come down. So there was an unpredictability there, whereas I think with Joe Biden, quite frankly, the Russians just see a predictable weakness. And so just as during the Obama administration, another weak administration in the views of the Russians, they moved into Syria. They also moved to annex Crimea. There were 4 years of relative stability. And now under Joe Biden, again, we're seeing the Vladimir Putin snarl at the Ukrainians and consider a major incursion into that country.
Well, everyone is waiting on bated breath to see what the heck President Putin is going to do next. You made an interesting observation on the timeline of things when it comes to the Olympics, actually, and Putin not wanting to steal President Xi's limelight.
Yeah, interestingly enough, Vladimir Putin moved into Georgia in the Caucasus during the 2008 Olympics, which took place also in Beijing. That was the Summer Games in 2008. And in 2014, around the Sochi Games, which Putin himself hosted, he moved into Crimea. So one might think as sort of a natural symmetry, it would be complete this time around if he moved in during the Chinese Olympics. But I think the nature of the Sino-Russian, the Chinese-Russian relationship has shifted. They are now very close partners, if not allies altogether. And so it would embarrass Xi, who sees this as his great moment on the international stage to host another Olympic Games, if the limelight was thrust instead to Ukraine. So I suspect, despite the winter months being, for military purposes, an ideal month for Vladimir Putin to go, perhaps at the end of February, and secondly, also being helpful to Putin because during the winter months, you can use energy as a weapon against the Europeans. Do they really want to impose sanctions against Russia and potentially freeze or see their gas prices skyrocket? I'm a little bit skeptical of that. So Putin may want to move sooner rather than later, but the Olympic Games may not be the ideal moment.
Yeah, and according to British intelligence, Russia is was also plotting, could possibly still be, to instill a pro-Russian leader in Ukraine. No word on how they would do that, but a lot of moving parts to this story, and it's clear that tensions are elevating rapidly. Peter Rao, thank you so much for joining us.